to a Bergkamp Wonderland, an Arsenal podcast. I'm Gooner Gimli, and tonight I'll be joined by... First up, he's the hairy ladies' favourite. It's Danny the GFP. Hello, Danny.
Hello, Mr. Gimli.
How are you?
There's only one Danny at Arsenal, and it's not Welbeck.
Well, it's not you.
Isn't it? Maybe it's
No.
Carbassian.
It's definitely not. I think you've been dreaming again.
I have. I've made a fool of myself.
Oh, you have.
I'll get back in my hole. Go on.
It's only the first 30 seconds as well. Luckily enough, you have the power to edit this.
I certainly do.
Next up, joining me, is a man who's taken the name as ITK Killer. It's Raj Patel. Hello, Raj.
Hello, my little daffodil. How are you?
My little daffodil. I would prefer to be called your little leek.
I'm at peace with the world now. I think I may have embarrassed myself on Monday, so I'm now a lot more relaxed. And
Surely it feels better to get it off your chest, though.
I did, but I felt a bit kind of guilty for about 2 days. I slept on it, and we'll see. We'll discuss that later on, I'm sure.
I think for me it was probably the funniest bit of the podcast on Monday.
It's unlike me. It's unlike me.
Oh, legend. Right, next up, he's only just removed his bulletproof vest from a fun-packed deadline day on Monday. It's the man himself, Geoff Arsenal. Hello, Geoff.
Hello, mate. Hello. How you doing, Gimli?
Are you just about, sorted yourself out?
Battered and bruised, mate, but I'm here, ready to go again.
Oh, I bet you ate the next morning, didn't you?
I'm an old soldier, mate. I put my head down into the wind. Sure to worry about it.
You should say to the people that you're going to have a tag team partner next time we do that.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'd like to announce that we're going to have Blackburn George on my side, and Tim Payton's going to have the famous Gav Roche from She War. So that would be interesting. It's like two AWOBs against the AKBs, to abbreviate it. So it should be interesting.
They shall talk to the death, and then the listeners can decide the winner.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Be fun anyway, that's for sure.
It certainly will. And last but by no means least, chief football writer from the Daily Mirror, it's Martin Lipton. Hello, Martin.
Hello.
Carl, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Arsenal. I love Arsenal. Just to show you that the fact that my allegiance is elsewhere doesn't change the fact I've always loved Arsenal. Therefore, anything I say comes from a love of Arsenal and not a detestation.
I see we've got ourselves a character voice.
That's an introduction and a half.
That's actually made me a bit worried.
We'll start tonight's podcast by going straight over to Danny, who has all the Arsenal scored from across the board.
A fantastic win for the ladies. 2-1 away at Birmingham City ladies, who have been a bit of a thorn in our side over the years. Goals from Casey Stoney and Freda Ayisi. See, I've even done the apostrophe in the middle, so I know how to say it properly. We're now fourth, battling against the finances in women's football now, but they're doing good. And the next game is this very night at home to Chelsea. And if I can go and find any kind of... I kick off in 1 minute. I find any kind of results, I shall update through the show. The under-21s had another fantastic win. 4-2 at home to West Brom. Super Dan Crowley, who is the future of Arsenal, scored after 3 minutes. And then Super Chupa Apcom, whose name I always get wrong, scored a hat-trick. We are top of the league. Next game is away at Aston Villa next Thursday. The under-18s are also top of the league. They had another really good win. They beat... No, they didn't. They lost. I just read it the wrong way around, 3-2. They lost 3-2, but they're still top of the league. We were 2-0 down after 9 minutes, and we scored 2 goals from Steffi Mavididi. It's Mavididi. Mavididi. And Tyrell Robinson. I think they've both scored a few goals this season. So, like I said, we're still top of the league. And their next game is away at Norwich on Saturday the 13th of September. And now, because we sponsor the Barbican Pirates, and we're contractually obliged to give
tell you that they lost.
that they've lost again. And good old Chris, their manager, has given us this quick report. It's only a few lines, so hold on to your underpants. This could get scary. Our scheduled league match was postponed due to weather, to waterlogged pitch. It would be helpful if I'd have read this first, wouldn't it? So at least I know what's coming. So we played a friendly against the Southway instead. The Pirates were 1-0 up in just 2 minutes when Steve Lacey turned and hit a lovely volley into the bottom right-hand corner. But we were pegged back to 1-1 on the 23rd minute. That was the score at half-time. Ryan Dainty scored a cheeky lob to put us 2-1 up early in the second half. Ooh, what could happen, Gim? Any idea? Do you reckon they went on to win?
I reckon they went on to score about 4. not the Pirates, the other team.
Sadly, Sadly, the all too familiar story happened. Conceded in the 50th, the 70th, and the 72nd minute, thus losing the game 4-2. Sad face. Our fixture this weekend is at home in the League to Need a Cab. 10:30 kick-off at Plimpton St Mary. I continue to ignore the hashtag Carpenter out calls. Come on, ye pirates! There you go. Another.
What is it? 4 losses out of 4, yeah?
I think he's lost everything. I think
At least you could say he's
Blackpool.
prolific.
They're Blackpool.
Yeah.
Well, they've got a full squad of I think 24, 26 players. Blackpool haven't got any. They've got none. So there you go. That's a lovely roundup. Come on, the Pirates. Carpenter in.
I think, every week it just becomes that little bit more predictable.
I think next time I'm actually going to proofread it before I read it out, then I'll have some idea of what I'm doing. But there you go, that's me all lovely and done.
By the end of the season it's just going to be Pirates lost again.
Yeah, move on.
That'll be it.
Near the end of last season, I was just going under 18s lost again, bottom of the league, next.
Right, first on the agenda tonight is our 1-1 draw away to Leicester City. To start us off, I think we'll go to Geoff.
You know what? It's so much happened between then and now that I've almost forgotten about that game, and I think it's best to be forgotten about it.
Yeah.
We'd come in off the emotional Besiktas game. I mean, that was a roller coaster, wasn't it? We was all biting our nails to the end of that. Travelled down to Leicester on a Sunday. Was it a Sunday or was it a Saturday? I can't recall. Anyway, Sunday. Yeah, it was a Sunday 4:00, wasn't it? So we had the extra day, which was good, or so we thought. Started okay, wasn't too bad, knocking the ball out, keeping possession. I think we went in front, but then we just seemed to run out of legs. It was so difficult, wasn't it? And again, we had a lot of the play, but we couldn't muster up that second goal to get a win, really. It was very difficult.
No, I agree. We'll go to you next, Raj. Just some stats, and these are courtesy of the BBC, so don't hang me if they're wrong. 68% of the possession. So why didn't we win the game comfortably, Raj?
We just looked tired, I think, and we didn't play very well. I mean, Aaron Ramsey probably had his worst game in quite a while for us, but he's been on he's been so great for us for the last year and a half that he had to have a blip at some point, so we can't really blame him. And we had the kind of Sonogo situation up front, which I think everyone's exhausted in terms of arguments and stuff like that. I'm not too sure what Martin Lipton thinks, but it was just not our day that day. We didn't play very well.
You haven't played well all season so far, though, have you? Let's be honest. I mean, you may be unbeaten in 5, but no one could say you've been impressive. It's been results despite the performances rather than because of them. There've been isolated moments, but there's been nothing concerted or convincing in any of the displays, I don't think. I mean, I was at Besiktas last week, and that could easily have gone the other way. I mean, Arsenal really didn't get going at all. And I think that's the problem at the moment, that others have come out the blocks absolutely flying. And Arsenal, for whatever reason, hasn't. I mean, they could easily have lost to Everton. I know the second goal was offside, and in the end, the last 10, suddenly the game changed. But for most of that game, there was a flatness about the display, which was surprising and quite concerning, I would have thought. Again, the Palace game was nicked in the last kick, and it wasn't a great display. And Sunday was just a continuation of that. There's something slightly wrong at the moment. I mean, I think the lack of a focal point up front is obviously a factor therein. But there's other things as well. There seems to be a lack of energy, and it's strange because obviously the Charity Shield or Community Shield, whatever you called it, when Arsenal smashed City, looked like it was going to be a good start and a reason to move on. And in fact, that seems to have been a rather early false dawn, which is surprising, to be honest.
Well, what's missing, Martin?
Well, pace in key areas, I think. I mean, this is where you really could do with Walcott at the moment because he gets in behind. Sanchez is finding his feet quite clearly. And that will take a while. You can't expect any player, no matter how much you pay for him, to be brilliant straight away, particularly if he's playing in an alien sort of role, as he has done a couple of times. And again, I'm still not sure about Arteta. I know he gives balance. When he doesn't play, you have Flamini, who is not what he was first time round. And let's be fair, most Arsenal fans weren't devastated when he went to Milan first time round. So there's a lack of intensity in the team, I feel, at the moment. And it's almost as if Wenger has been playing this silly game, trying to spite everybody and prove he knows better, and probably because most cases he does, with regard to the transfers. And now he's got a bit of certainty in his squad. Whether or not people want Welbeck is irrelevant. He's there now. Perhaps that gives him a chance to sort it out. But I think the whole thing was summed up really from by his attitude on Monday. I'm sure that didn't do anyone any favours to see him gallivanting around the Vatican when Arsenal didn't need a striker.
Yeah,
He
very
looked nice
true.
in a suit though.
But Martin, do you think that our poor start to the season, and I say poor even though we haven't lost a game, but it's been to kind of phrase underwhelming, has been down to our failure to address a transfer and go out and buy in the positions we need? Or do you think it's the excuse that Arsene Wenger himself has used, that they're still maybe a little bit fatigued coming off of a World Cup?
6 of one and half a dozen of the other. I think there is definitely a factor in there. Then again, I don't think Özil played that well in the World Cup. I thought he was very poor last week. I don't think he's pulled up any trees at all after his initial flurry of activity when he came into the club. I've been disappointed with a player of such quality. I expect more from him. I hope he expects more of himself, and that hasn't delivered. But there are clear issues. I mean, not having a proper holding midfielder. It's bad enough when an international team like England can't develop one. It's absolutely scandalous when a club with Arsenal's resources can't go out and buy one. If they can't develop one, go and buy one. It's not as if they don't exist. Go and do it. It's a pretty clear thing that they need. Why haven't they? It's crazy to me. So that's an element as well. And of course, the striker situation. I think the disquiet of the fans comes across as well, and maybe that adds to flat. I mean, the problem with footballers is, for all the money they earn, a lot of them are actually quite shallow and insecure people, and they need to feel loved and confident, and they need actually the supporters to be getting behind them rather than questioning them. And I know they shouldn't, particularly when you look at the sort of money they own, but that's the reality.
And Danny, Martin said there about Ozil's poor performances for the season. Do you think that's down to him playing on the left and being out of position?
It's not going to help though, is it? Because that's not his ideal position. I don't know why Wenger is doing that. I mean, there may be the slight reason that we're playing away, and then you're going to try and pack the midfield with only playing one up front. Maybe he's trying to throw him in at the deep end to, the way that Wenger always likes to chuck people out on the wings. He's done it with Ramsey, he's done it with Wilshere, and it's definitely worked with Ramsey a little bit. He's come back a better player when he's come back into the central midfield. It hasn't really worked with Wilshere because it messed up his game last season, although Wilshere is playing well now. It's not as if we haven't got anybody to play out on the left-hand side, because when he had that game there, he played Cazorla in the middle. Now, why would you play Cazorla in the middle and then start Ozil out on the left? Surely those two would be better playing the other way round, and then push Ozil further forward and have him playing behind Sanogo, because with Ozil's vision is going to make Sanogo's life much better. And even if you are playing up front with the human windmill, Ozil can just try and time the flapping of Sanogo's arms, legs and head like he did against Benfica, and just try and use Sanogo as some kind of bollard to bounce the ball off of him into the net. That's about the only way that Sanogo is ever going to score a goal. So I don't know why he's doing it.
You like him, don't you, as a player?
No.
I've got a faith in him.
No, it is a strange one though, because you would. I mean, me personally, I would stick him in as a number 10. I think he could be the best number 10 in the world. I really do.
Definitely.
If we can play him into form. But I think maybe Wenger's thinking was, especially at a place like. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is difficult. They've just been promoted. It's like their cup final, the first time back in the Premier League for a little while again. They're all going to be up for it, playing against a big team like Arsenal. And I maybe think that he's a little bit scared of leaving Cazorla on the left hand side, because he doesn't really do that defensive work that good. And maybe he was thinking that Ozil, where he's played in that German model, he does a little bit more defensive work rather than Cazorla. I don't know. It's a difficult one, but I would definitely put him in at number 10 and just let him play there and let him play his way into form, because plus once you're in the centre of the park, you can play left, you can play right. It's a lot more easier when you've got the game in front of you. If you're on the left hand side, you can only go one way really, well, two ways. You can go sideways or backwards. You can't. It's very difficult,
Geoff, I'll stick with you. Alexis managed to score his first Premier League goal. How did he look against Leicester? Was it an all-round improved performance from the boy?
I don't know about all-round improvement. He's struggling to find his feet a little bit, but like Martin said, it is difficult. It doesn't matter how much money you cost. You come into a Premier League, there is nothing like it. Others, Perez has said it in the past, and Ozil said it last year. The hustle bustle and the pardon my French, the kick, bollock and bite of it, that they're really up and at you all the time. You don't really get any time on the ball. There's no respite, and it's continuous. But you can see he's got natural ability. He's got natural. His feet are fantastic. He's very quick. I would like to see him as a number 9 playing up top again. I'd like Ozil as a number 10. I'd like to see Sanchez, Alexis up the top as a number 9. He gives you that pace. He gives you that out ball if you get in trouble. And I'm sure if they, I'm sure they could work together. If Ozil was, I can just see how Ozil threading them balls through to an on-running Alexis, like Martin said about Theo. I mean, Theo's not going to be back for a little bit yet. A few more, maybe another month or so. So, but he's finding his feet. But I think you can see that he's going to be a fantastic player for Arsenal and a great addition to the Premier League.
But he's not a 9, is he? I mean, wherever he's played wide, coming inside. I mean, when he took England apart last November for Chile, it was spinning out and then going into the channels, and that's his game. He did that when he was, played wide at Udinese before he went to Barcelona. For it to work with Sanchez, whoever it is, that you need to have the focal point, and that's what hasn't been there. When no one has trusted the ball to get him in the vicinity of Sonogo, let alone stick. And I think that puts a lot of onus now on Welbeck to answer that and be that player. And of course, he's not really that sort of centre forward either, in the way that you'd look at maybe Giroud as a focal point. So it's going to be interesting to see quite how it pans out. But there's no reason why Arsenal shouldn't get better as they find their feet together. I would imagine they will.
And Martin, do you think that our mentality and the way we attack and play our football is down to one of the stats here, 24 shots with only 6 on target? And I think Pearson actually said after the game that they didn't really fear Arsenal because most of their shots had come from outside the box. Do you think we need to change our mentality?
Well, you've got to be able to get in the box to score, haven't you? You can't. It's as simple as that. If you have a threat, I mean, look at the way that Chelsea have got a threat now in Costa. They've got a focal point to their attack, who's someone who gets in where it matters, gets in where it hurts, and looks to score goals in the box. Doesn't care how scruffy and horrible the goals are; they all count one. Seems to me too often over many years, actually, Arsenal thought you get points for artistic impression. Well, you get points for sticking the ball in the net, for scoring goals. It doesn't matter how you do it. You've just got to be willing to score scruffy, horrible goals. And it's the scruffy, horrible goals that win you things, that get you in the top 4, that ensure you're in the Champions League next year.
I was going to say that one of the main talking points of the game was Koscielny's head injury. There's quite a lot of controversy on the day surrounding that, and should he have been allowed to come back on the pitch, because we all know he was at fault for the for the Leicester goal. What did you make of that?
I think it was unlucky yet again that almost every game this season, poor old Koscielny has had some kind of knock, some kind of thing that you think, is it best to leave him on, is it best to take him off? Luckily, in the other games that we've had to take him off, we've had someone who can come on. Callum Chambers has either come on to play instead of him, to replace him, or started the game instead of him. And I'm just very worried this season that the fact that Vermaelen's gone, that Callum is coming in at such a young age, playing in a position that is quite new to him, because most of last season for Southampton he played at right back. And I'm really worried about Koscielny, because Dom, when you can hear in your head when every time that Koscielny takes a knock, much like when Wilshere, every time he takes a knock, we all think, oh God, this could be it. I'm starting to feel like that when it comes to Koscielny. And I think it's just bad luck, because he was obviously very dazed and you couldn't leave him on. If it had been closer to half time, then the other side, then he could have probably taken him off, let the game go on, and then he'd have come off at half time, and then you could have reassessed him. Because I remember later on in the game, he was sitting on the bench next to, I think, Wilshere, and he was looking perfectly okay. So I think it was a bit of bad luck, a bit of bad timing, but it just makes me worry that the coming season, that he does seem to be a little bit fragile at the moment.
It shouldn't be down to managers. We had it with a certain club at the other end of the Seven Sisters Road last season, didn't we? With when Lloris got injured at Everton and stayed on the pitch even though they had no idea what was going on. And it's just wrong. It shouldn't be down to managers. You are endangering the safety of players. And it may be unfortunate for the team, but if a player gets a head injury, he shouldn't be on the park. He shouldn't have any option. He should be decided. There should be an independent doctor in the ground whose job is to assess that and straight away say, hang on, he's concussed, he's not right, you've got to take him off.
Yeah, because all it takes is for one time to listen to a player who's concussed and doesn't know any better, and then it could go on to be something a lot worse, and then who is to blame? So it should be taken completely out of the club's manager, the physio, and the player and the referee, and have maybe an independent person on the sideline to go, nope, you are off.
The
People
players,
might like it, but at least we know where we are. It's like this, the situation with the magic spray. People know where we are. The goal line technology, whatever. People just accept that's what is. They don't have to like it. They just accept it because it should be pretty simple for me. And the health and safety of players has got to be paramount.
I think the one question we've got to ask as well is we all know that Danny Welbeck was signed on Monday. Like him or loathe him or however you feel on it, there is a little bit later on in the podcast. But Martin, do you think Danny Welbeck could have added anything to that performance?
Well, certainly there's a dynamism about him. You would have had someone who could actually trouble them in behind. I mean, the one thing you look at the Leicester team, they've got lots of endeavour and graft. Haven't got a lot of pace at the back. And they could have been, Paul Konchesky's your left back. You're not very quick, are you? Your fullbacks are not your quickest players. So the pace of Welbeck and the fact that he actually does occasionally know how to put the ball in the net and would be a threat and a real thrust for any team he plays for would certainly have made a difference on the day because they weren't worried about Sanogo. The only people who were worried about Sanogo were the Arsenal fans. Let's be honest.
yeah, it's very true.
It's very true.
I remember he played in the semi-final of the FA Cup, didn't he, against Wigan? And I thought to myself, you're never going to score a goal. It is Sanogo. You are never going to score a goal for this club. You are simply just not good enough. And not much seems to have improved a few months on. A few goals in a pre-season friendly that no one cares about the Emirates is irrelevant. It's when it actually matters. When it matters if you miss, then you find out what a player is. And at the moment, he has got absolutely nothing. And Leicester loved it. They loved seeing him up front because they weren't scared of him. Previous week they played against Costa. Week before that, they'd had Lukaku. They were scared of those two. They weren't scared of Sanogo.
No, that's very true indeed. Right, we'll cut the Leicester bit there and move on. I'm pleased to say joining us now is Crawley Town and ex-Aston Villa manager John Gregory. Hello, John.
Hello, how are you? Nice to be with you.
Oh, I'm not too bad, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
I hope you don't mind, but we've got some questions from our Facebook page and from our Twitter followers. So is it okay to ask you a few now?
Yeah, go for it.
Fantastic. I'll start with one that I've got myself. And I just wanted to ask, how was football changed in your time in management?
Players totally pampered. I think that's been the biggest change. I think, obviously, when we played, it was kind of get on with it. We didn't get cosseted quite so much, and obviously we didn't have things like psychologists coming in and that kind of thing. It was just if you had a bad game, it was like tough luck, mate. You need to sort your life out. You have to sort of deal with it yourself, and I think that side of it has changed. I think obviously the finances is just incredible. Even when I can remember going to Aston Villa as Brian Little's assistant back in '94, and one of the players was on £4,000 a week, and I just couldn't catch my breath that he was earning £4,000 a week. And a very famous goalkeeper that played for Brian Little and myself actually for a short period. In the last year of his contract, he was going to be on £9,000 a week, and it was just like obscene. And that was, just barely 20 years ago. So having to manage players on huge salaries, I think, was probably the biggest hurdle that I had to come up against, and having to deal with multi-millionaires. I think that was the hardest thing, because in my day, you get fined a tenner for being late, and a tenner was a lot of money. If you find somebody 10 grand for being late today, they'd still laugh at you and probably pay you it in cash. So I think that was the hardest thing. I think in management, it has changed a lot. But having said that, it's almost sort of gone full circle now that I'm managing in League One. Players' contracts are obviously their salaries are very minimal, and I suppose in many respects that's how it was when I was sort of playing at the top level. I was scared of losing 25 quid. I was scared of not playing on Saturday because I wouldn't get my appearance fee. And that has almost come full circle with me managing in League One. You know, it's kind of like the old days, yeah.
And another question that almost follows on from that. You said about money there and how it's taken over the game. I mean, are the bigger clubs with the oil money ruining football?
Well, they're it's that's a tough thing to answer in many respects because it has been all about who's got the most money tends to win the championships, and obviously Roman Abramovich has gone into Chelsea and spent huge amounts of money. They've lost millions of I think roughly £100 million every year since Roman's been there. They've basically just been able to spend, and there's been no comeback on it. And they've been able to buy the best players without any question. Ferguson was slightly different in his approach. He tended to buy value for money. He didn't really spend huge amounts of money like Manchester City have done. And you know, we've seen City come in the last few years, and I mean, without any question, they've bought the Premier League because of the amount of money that they've spent. It's just been untold amounts of money that have been able to pay in salaries and buying the best players. Transfer fees are irrelevant. You know, they can afford anybody. So I would say it's sport it a little bit. But then again, there's now 5 or 6 of them that of these sort of oil-rich tycoons that have just come in, and they're spending their money like wildfire at the very top. I think it's pretty exciting for everybody else, except for the likes of some of the lesser clubs lower down that have to balance the books. You know, I think it's hard for them to try and stay with it. As of course, the Football League is now finding it increasingly difficult. I think every year now, the Football League is suffering because of the amount of money that's being spent in the Premier League. And I have to say one thing, you know, I spoke to a few of my players this season, and no matter who you played for, if you played for Northampton Town in the 4th Division and you went and played for Plymouth Argyle, you never went for less money. You always went for more money than what you were earning. That was the only reason you moved.
Yeah.
And that is, for the first time this year, that has stopped. Players in the Football League, certainly in League 1 and 2, have actually moved club to get a salary, not to get a pay rise. They've actually gone to another club because maybe their club doesn't want to keep them next year, and they've had to go somewhere else for less money than what they earned last year. And I don't think that's ever happened before in the Football League. It's never happened ever during my football career. And I spoke to a lot of people, and there's a lot of footballers, today's footballers, that have never gone somewhere else for less money than what they're on. And that started to happen now in the Football League, and I think that's a worrying trend.
Mm. I mean, that's very interesting. I mean, going back to your time at Aston Villa, had the oil money been about then, would you have embraced it with open arms, or would you have preferred to do it the proper way?
I think I would have embraced it. I think I'd be lying if I didn't say that I'd embrace it. You know, when your owner comes to you and says, you know, do you want to go and sign David Silva? He's going to cost 42 million. And, you know, the club's record transfer fee might have been 20 million. You'd have just said, yeah, to get somebody of his ability in your team and to coach him and to manage him, and knowing full well that if you had 4 or 5 others of similar ability, they're going to help you get the Premiership title. No, I think, you know, it's easy for me to sit here now and say that I wouldn't have done it, but I have to be honest, whenever we tried to buy a player at Villa with Doug, you know, most of the time almost every time he backed me, he found the money somewhere. We did have to shop slightly lower down the market than maybe Manchester United and Chelsea were doing at the time. We did have to look for sort of bargains in many respects, but we still spent good money. And I think, you know, if Doug had come to me and said, Because I remember once Van Nistelrooy, we looked at Van Nistelrooy and he was going to Manchester United for 19 million, and I went and bought Juan Pablo Angel from River Plate in Argentina, and I bought him for 9.5 because that's basically what we could afford. But I think at the time, hand on heart, if I'd have been able to go and get Van Nistelrooy, I would have gone and got Van Nistelrooy, even if it had cost £19 million. So to answer your question, I think I would embrace the money given the opportunity. So, I can't criticise the likes of Pellegrini and Mourinho and now Van Gaal for going out spending that kind of money.
No, I admire you for your honesty. I've got a question here from one of our regular panel members, Chris, who's not with us tonight. But he'd like to know, do you think old school management can still work in the modern game?
No, I don't think it can. I think Sir Alex Ferguson was the last of that breed. He ruled that club from top to bottom, and I think he was the last of a breed, and I think that he did it exceptionally well, and he continued to win. He continued to win trophies. You may remember, unfortunately, I regard Brian Clough as the greatest manager that we ever produced, and certainly during my time, for what he did, how he did it, and with his resources, I just thought he was the best. He ruled old school, but as towards the end, because he wasn't winning trophies and wasn't vying for the titles, he found it a little bit more difficult to rule old school ways, and because you've always got to be able to back it up with being a successful manager. And just sadly, towards the end, Brian didn't sort of contest finals or championships as Sir Alex did. So he slowly, Brian, I'm afraid, slowly lost a little bit of his power. But Sir Alex, of course, continued with his power, winning the Premiership in his last full season here. So he was able to still rule old school. But I think it's very hard for anybody else now ever to rule old school. Probably Harry's one of the surviving members. Sam Allardyce to a certain degree, but I think even Sam's changed. Sam's changed a lot behind the scenes in the scientific approach. He does rely heavily on stats and his scientific men behind his training routines and so on and so forth. But Harry's probably the last of that breed, and while he continues to be successful, I would imagine nothing will ever change Harry. But it is harder, yes, without any question. It's much harder, and you have to change. You have to adopt. You have to be somewhat slightly more sympathetic towards players. I remember Sir Alex saying once that he was in the dressing room after a game, after a defeat, and he said that one of the players actually was crying in the corner because they'd lost. And he hadn't had a particularly good game, and he turned around to me and he said, "You'd never see Brian Robson cry." So he was still trying to retain a bit of the old school, but I think it's gone. I don't think it'll ever come back.
No.
John, it's Geoff here.
Hello, Geoff.
I understand. Did you play under Ron Saunders at Villa?
I did, yes.
Yeah. What was he like? Because he was a proper old school manager, wasn't he?
I joined from Northampton Town, and I suddenly went from 4th division to first division. Obviously, like from League 2 to the Premiership. And I was in the squad, and I played a couple of games, got in the team, and we'd have like little shooting sessions, and you had to pass the ball to Ron, and he'd lay it off, and you had a shot, and you had a shot at goal, and people like, obviously, Brian became a big friend of mine, Brian Little, but Brian was an established first-team player by then, and Johnny Gibman and Andy Gray, Alex Cropley, players like that.
Yeah, all good players, wasn't they?
All good players, and I can remember, like, Brian Little would shoot and hit the corner flag, and he'd say, "Bad luck, Brian," and I'd shoot, hit the crossbar, and he'd say, "Rubbish, absolute rubbish." I was going to swear then, but I'm not supposed to, so I won't. But he'd say, "Crap, bloody crap." Never complimented me whatsoever, and just knocked me down. And it was his way of sort of kind of never let my feet leave the floor. We played Manchester United at home. I scored 2 goals in the first half for Villa against Man U. We're 2-0 up at half time. Man United took over in the second half. We drew 2-2. And I picked up the newspaper on the Sunday thinking there's going to be a nice article about me because I scored 2 goals. And it's Ron Saunders was quoted as saying, the question was, how do you think John Gregory played? And Ron Saunders said, where did he go in the second half? And that was Ron. No compliments, just basic truth, really. He just said, where did he go to in the second half? He found it very difficult to say well done to anyone. He was a real tough guy. In fact, he used to join in all the 7 and 8-a-side matches that we played, and he'd end up kicking players. He'd kick some of the players that were actually going to play on the Saturday. And he'd just say, get up, you tard. What's he like, because he was just a real hard guy. But he taught me a lot. I mean, there's parts of his management that I admired, because he was very hard. Gary Shaw was an was a brilliant 18-year-old player at the time, and he was destined for greater things. And he just used to hammer Gary Shaw every opportunity he got, because he didn't want his feet to leave the floor. He didn't want to become a big head. So he was a very good manager, Ron. I had a lot of time for him, even though he sold me after 2 years.
And Danny, I understand you've got something as well you wanted to ask.
Yeah, before I ask my question, John, when I play for any kind of football management game, the first thing I do is do a John Gregory. I get rid of all the foreigners and I try and play nothing but English players. And I've done that with Arsenal last season and this, and we've done back-to-back Premier Leagues. So maybe there's a lesson in there for.
Had any players playing for Arsenal, surely?
No, I'll go and buy them.
Yeah,
I'll go and buy them. I'll get rid of them all because I've done that for years and years because that's always the way I like to do it.
Well, he bought one this week, didn't he?
I think that might have been a mistake. Hopefully it'll work out. So I've got a couple of questions about your English core. You bought one of my personal favourite players, Paul Merson of Villa, in September 1998 for £6.75 million from Middlesbrough. That was a lot of money to pay for a 30-year-old player. Why did you decide to buy Paul at that age, and how do you rate him for how good he was for you and for Villa?
Well, I'll answer the last bit. He was phenomenal. He was. I often get asked who was my best signing, and I have to say I tried to evaluate it, and Olive Melberg, sort of pound for pound, I paid $5 million for Olive, and he played for 9 years for Villa, and he obviously played for 5 years after I left, and he was real value for money. I say for £5 million, you get 9 seasons out of him. And he played sort of, 42, 45 games a season for Villa, all during that period. Never got injured, never missed a tackle, never missed a header, and was just a brilliant guy. So I tend to use him as being my sort of best signing because of the amount of years he played for Villa. But for pure ability, excitement, and often man of the match awards, Merson was out on his own, was an incredible player. And you were right in saying when I took him, he's a 30-year-old boy. I thought his best days were behind him, obviously, at Arsenal. But I can remember sitting down and talking to him, and I could just see in his eyes that he was a little bit lost. I think being up in Middlesbrough, he found it hard being away from London. He wanted to get a little bit closer to home. It had obviously a few problems. I think up there there was a bit of a gambling, drinking culture. He was there with Gaza and 1 or 2 others, and I think he was kind of happy to come out of that environment. And when he came to us, he was just absolute. From day one, he was absolutely brilliant. He was very humble with everybody. The fact that he'd had such an amazing career up until then. I mean, I think he was still currently an England international at that particular time. And, we suddenly got him in our dressing room. And just to have somebody of his ilk in our dressing room, I think was amazing. It gave the whole club an amazing lift. And literally from day one, I think he scored on his debut. I think he might have scored the winner, a penalty against Wimbledon, I think it was. And then I beg your pardon, I think it was Derby at home. I think he scored his first goal. We won 1-0. He scored the goal, put us top of the league. and he just became a fan's hero overnight, and he was a player's hero. And I think that is always the yardstick that you're measured by. You know, fans can love you, chairman can love you, but if the rest of the dressing room love you, they're the biggest critics of the lot, the other players in the dressing room, and they absolutely worship Paul Merson. And he, like McGrath before him, you know, McGrath never trained, and McGrath could be away for 3 days of the week and never train. But every Saturday he'd be man of the match. And Merson was like that. He missed the odd day with training. He had a few problems. He had a few demons to deal with. And if he missed a day's training, nobody cared, because you knew on a Saturday that he'd roll up his sleeves and probably end up being the best player. So he was it was a pleasure to work with, Paul Merson. Absolute pleasure. And I'd never have anyone ever say anything bad about Paul, because he was just truly sensational.
Carrying on with Villa,
Yes.
John. Can you, Dwight York? I had a
Yes.
pal of mine come round today. I said, "Listen, we've got John Gregory on tonight on the podcast."
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Ask him about Dwight York. Is it true that you said if I had a gun, I would have shot him?" Regards to
Yeah,
transfer to Man United.
I did, because that was it was a situation that I got a sniff of it that summer. I was away on holiday in the south of France, and I remember Fergie called me and said, "What you doing with this? What you doing with that?" And then he dropped in at the end of the conversation, "What about Yorkie? What's happening with Yorkie?" And I said, "Well, he's under contract. He's got like 2 years, 3 years, something." And he said, "Would you think about moving him?" And I just said, "No, no chance." And that was kind of the end of the conversation. And then as we came back for the summer, I felt that, you know, you can just sense things. I get to know players so well that Yorkie wasn't sort of there mentally. And within a few days, Fergie called me, and he offered £8 million for Yorkie. And I just thought, this is going to, I knew from that minute that it was going to be a struggle to try and keep Dwight from going to Manchester United, for God's sake. I mean, at that particular time, you know, United, they were a team, and under Fergie, they were massive. And Andy Cole was playing. I think Cantona had just about gone by then, or was just about going, and they were obviously looking to bring Yorkie in. I'd had the pleasure of working with Yorkie as Brian Little's assistant for about 3 years, and then I came back as manager. And in my first 6 months, I joined in the February, and from then until the end of the season, he was absolutely brilliant. Scored lots of goals, and I just, as soon as Fergie come on, I just thought, oh, this is only going to end up one way. And then it was a question of just trying to get as much money as I could. But we turned them down. They made an offer. We turned them down. They made another offer. We turned them down. And we played Everton on the Saturday, the first game of the season at Goodison. It was Walter Smith's first home game. They got a penalty, which Bahnisch saved, and it finished 0-0. And Yorkie hardly touched the ball, and he sulked for 90 minutes. He absolutely sulked. And on the Monday morning, he came in my office and he said, "Gav, I don't want to play for Villa anymore. I want to play for Man United." I'll never forget those words. And I wanted to shoot him there and then. Because we'd qualified for UEFA Cup. We were, you know, I was a young, up-and-coming manager, and everything had gone fantastically well for me. And I really didn't want to lose Dwight. He was like my kingpin. We hadn't signed Merson by then. We obviously signed Merson with Yorkie's money. But I had Yorkie in my team, and I thought, if I got Dwight York, I can get in the top 4. If I got Dwight York. And the fear of me losing him, I think, really got to me. And when he said he didn't want to play for Villa anymore, I took it as a personal insult. And that's why I resorted to that particular statement. Yeah, but I could have shot him, honestly. It's just like, how can you say that? How can you say you don't want to play for Villa anymore? Get out of my office. Clear off, go to Manchester United.
What was the fee in the end?
It was 12.6.
Yeah.
And I think Doug bought him for about 20 grand when he first when he first come over from Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, so but he was a fantastic player for Villa. I have to say, he to be on hand on heart, he deserved to go to Manchester United. He really did because he was an outstanding player, and he won the treble in his first season at Man U, which basically tells you he was right to go. And I was just gutted that I lost him. Really, I think that was the thing that hurt me more than anything.
Martin,
After you've been at QPR, John, when you left in 2007, you're out of the game domestically for a long time. You went all over the place, didn't you? To Kazakhstan and Israel and places like that. When you came back last year, did you feel rejuvenated or had a point to prove, or did you just want to just embrace English football again after that? How do you feel about it now?
I think the latter. I wanted to embrace English football. I missed the honesty. I miss the honesty and the grit and the real sort of professionalism. And listen, we criticise our officials. We criticise the FA. We criticise the Football League. That they're all sort of back. They're living in the past, and they should sort of try and think a little bit more modern. And we criticise everything in this country about our football. But do you know what? When you go abroad and you look around the world and Israel, as wonderful as the country is, it's a wonderful country regardless of all the problems that they face, and the people there are amazing. But the football is lower than the Conference South. I mean, it's just not supported. People don't go and watch it. I mean, when you look at the attendances that we have in the Football League in this country, it's incredible. It really is incredible at the football here. And everybody here, it's we spoke early on, just at the top of the show, Martin, about supporting Tottenham as kids, and it's ingrained in you, and you don't change your allegiance. Whether you support Gillingham. And you'll support Gillingham in the conference. You'd support them in League Two, in League One, in the Championship, whatever. You just that's your team forever, and that tends not to happen abroad. So I embraced the game when I came back. I just thought it's we're little old Crawley down there in Sussex, and we don't have huge attendances. But you know what? The people that come absolutely love the club, and they live for their home games, and they get on the bus and they'll travel all the way. I mean, we might as well be in the Northern League this season because we've got some journeys. Last season, 3 teams that got promoted: Scunthorpe, Rochdale, and Fleetwood.
They're nice and easy trips, aren't they?
Our local derby is Leyton Orient. We've just lost Brentford. Brentford has just got promoted, so we won't even play them. So our local derbies are Leyton Orient and Gillingham. So our little band of fans, and they love their football, and I think that's the thing that really sort of keeps me motivated, keeps me going. The real honesty, and I've got footballers in my team that are just honest as the day's long, and they just every time they pull that shirt on, they just play their hearts out each and every week. And that's what I love about English football, and that's what I really missed being away. So. That's probably the best thing. Yeah, it's worth coming home for. Trust me.
John, another part to the one I was asking you about the English players is in your because you in your first full season with Villa, you spent £37 million, which is that was 1998-99, the season after Arsenal did the double. Then you bought players like Dion Dublin for £7 million, Steve Stone for £7 million, Alan Thompson for £6 million, Steve Watson for £5 million, Dave Unsworth for £4 million. Yes. Did you feel a lot of pressure on you after spending all that money back then to win the league? Because I remember that season, wasn't it up to about January or February in 98-99 that you were right top of the league most of the way through the season?
I think I think some of those fees are actually not quite as high as.
Oh, they're all off of Wikipedia. They were probably all rubbish.
Yeah, they were slightly low. I mean, Dion was 5.
Yeah.
Stoney was 5. And you say it was 37 million. I think we probably recouped that with some of the sales Obviously, Dwight York, we got 12.6 back for him and things
According
like that.
to Wiki, it was about 22 million you got back in
Yeah,
sales.
I actually only spent 16 million in 4 years. The actual figure was 16 million, my deficit, which
Yeah.
worked £4 million a year, which
It's not bad.
wasn't in those days. That was not a great deal really compared to what some were spending. But yeah, I did. I got I really felt that we were having a go. You know, I felt we were having a go. Doug was very supportive. He always said yes, literally always said yes. There were a few times when he just said, you know, it was a little bit out of our reach, like salary wise. Not so much the transfer fees, but the salaries were something that he found difficult. You know, obviously we did the Juninho thing when we had him sat at the desk and we found out that Madrid owed him £3 million, which they wanted from us, which we obviously weren't going to pay because it wasn't our debt, it was their debt. Or little things like that. But to say I was under pressure, I didn't really feel as if I was under pressure to win the league. I felt that I was under pressure to qualify for Europe because Brian had qualified before me. I qualified in my first season for Europe. I think I qualified in my second season as well. So I always felt that we had to, you know, we were been in Europe almost every year. And before Brian, Big Ron, of course, won the League Cup. Brian won the League Cup. So I won the Intertoto, which wasn't a massive achievement, if anything. So I did feel that I was under pressure to win things, and I was exceptionally serious about it. I wanted to win things as well, and that ultimately was one of the reasons that I ended up leaving, because I felt that Doug didn't really want to win things as much as I did, and I think that was what hurt me somewhat, because I wanted him to. It was the first year, I believe, that there was 4 teams that could qualify for the Champions League. And I wanted us to be one of those 4. And as you quite rightly said, we led the league at Christmas, and I think we went into the new year number 1 in the Premiership. And I just felt we needed to maybe add 1 or 2 just to make sure that we stayed there, because I wanted us to get in the Champions League. And as it turned out, we fell away. We ended up finishing 6th or 7th, possibly, I think, that year, which was a big disappointment to me. But yeah, I always felt under pressure, but it was a pressure that I kind of enjoyed, because I always felt that we had a football club that was capable of certainly getting very close to the goals that I'd set them, you know, of qualifying for Europe. I always felt that we would qualify for Europe. And I suppose I believed in my own ability, really, to manage the whole squad. So, yeah, that pressure thing was something that I live with every day, and you miss it, believe it or not, when it's not there, in a obscure kind of way. Certainly when you're not in work, you miss it terribly. You know, that pressure on you to succeed. Yeah.
You mentioned that Brian and Ron, before you both won the League Cup finals,
Yes.
do you get much credence? I think credence is the right word. Much plaudits for the fact that you played in an FA Cup final and you also managed a team in an FA Cup final, because I can't imagine there's many people that have done that.
Actually, that was a quiz question that one of my mates asked me a couple of years back.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find that possibly
Dalglish, I think, did.
Dalglish did it.
George Graham.
There's a few that have done it, and when I got asked the question, I answered about 3 or 4. I think I come up with about 3 or 4, and then I suddenly went, bloody hell! I think I've done that, haven't I? Which my pal laughed. Yeah, I don't know if Luca Vialli might have done, actually. He might have played in an FA Cup final and managed it when they won it, of course, against us.
Oh, that's very good.
John, what's the other record that you hold, mate? Can you remember it?
The other record that I hold is the undefeated for the first 12 games of a Premier League season with Aston Villa.
Yeah, there's another one as well, which you probably won't.
I know what's coming.
The field in a team of Englishmen.
No.
That's my favourite one.
Tell me when you give up.
wearing every outfield shirt for Aston Villa?
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Incredible.
You're still the only player that's ever done that. Played in every outfield position.
Yeah, well, in those days, of course, we had 1 to 12. Obviously, if you played right back, you wore the 2, left back, you wore the 3, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and obviously, I started off with the number 12. I think that's particular season, and so you didn't have your own designated shirt. You didn't have a squad number. You just wore whatever shirt the manager gave you. And I ended up wearing obviously every shirt. And we played Liverpool at home on Easter Monday in 1979. Easter Monday, Liverpool at home, which were in those days, of course, Liverpool won the league almost every year, and I think they were probably champions. And I somehow found the courage to ask Ron Saunders if I could wear the number 8 shirt, because I hadn't worn the number 8 shirt. I'd worn every shirt except the number 8. And I somehow found the courage to go and ask him if I could wear it. And he just said, yes, of course you can, John. Oh, that would be nice. And which was totally unlike him. But he let me wear the number 8. And I wore the number 8. I played centre half, actually, with Alan Evans. We played alongside each other at the back, me and Evo, and we beat Liverpool 3-1. And I completed the set from number 2 to number 12. I obviously didn't wear the number 1 shirt. I never ended up playing in goal. But
Amazing bit of trivia, though, isn't it? That will never happen again. Impossible.
Well, no, it can't happen again, obviously. But if Ron, that was. And I've kind of sort of kept that with me ever since, the fact that when Ron said to me, I want you to play left back today, I just said, yeah, okay, no problem. I'm not so sure that would happen today, because sometimes you say to left back, I want you to play right back today, and he'll say, oh, no, I can't play right back, I'm left back. I can't play right back. And then you'd say, well, you ain't playing at all then. You know, I always I grew up with the fact that if somebody else was better than me in my preferred position, I would rather play in another position to make sure that I played every week. And that was a great thing with Ron. He sort of played me almost every game, but I rarely played in the same position twice. You know, I played centre midfield, right side midfield, left side midfield. I even actually played up front. Martin, you might remember this. I played up front for Aston Villa. I wore the number 9 shirt at White Hart Lane.
Oh, blimey.
Against Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa when they made their home debut.
Oh, 4.
In 90...
4-1, 4-0, you battered them.
We beat Spurs 4-1. And that was the first time I'd ever played.
They'd drawn at Forest, hadn't they, on the previous Saturday?
Drew at Forest, 1 each at Forest. They drew.
Scored.
And then we came to White Hart Lane, and I don't think anyone even knew who Tottenham were playing that night. And we beat Wolves the previous Saturday. Andy Gray had scored. We started the season off, beaten 1-0. Andy Gray scored, but got injured. And Ron said to me on the Wednesday morning, can you play up front? And I said, yeah, of course I can. And he said, right, you're wearing the number 9 shirt tonight. And I wore the number 9, played against John Lacey and Barry Daines. Barry would
have been in goal, wouldn't he? Yeah.
Barry was in goal. And we went 1-0 up, and then Spurs equalised. And I just thought, oh, that's the end of that then. I won't see the ball again. But then I scored. I put us 2-1 up. And it was that thing, scoring against Tottenham. What am I doing, scoring against Tottenham? That's not supposed to do that. I don't think my dad was too happy. But we went 2-1 up, and then Brian Little scored, made it 3-1. And then Gary Shelton scored the 4th one, made it 4-1. So it was an amazing night. There was ticker tape welcome for them, and it was just incredible. 55,000, I think, was crammed into White Hart Lane that night. And we won 4-1. So that was very happy memories. Very happy.
John, being an Arsenal podcast, I think we'd probably get crucified if we didn't ask you an Arsenal-related question.
Okay.
So the final one from me tonight will be, which Arsenal player would you most like to have at Crawley, and why?
Oh, good question.
Thank you.
Very good question. Now, I'd like to have rolled the clock back a little. Are you on about current day Arsenal players?
Oh, you can do both if you're being given.
Well,
have Sonogo if you want.
Well,
Free.
I would probably say if it was in the past, there's my goodness, there's so many amazing Arsenal players that I could call upon. But if I looked at my Crawley team and thought, who would I want possibly more than anyone, it would probably be Vieira. I just think somebody like Patrick Vieira has such an enormous influence over a game. If Dennis Bergkamp hasn't got the football, he can't do his magic. He can't score goals. Tony Adams, another one, incredible. Sorry, I'm rambling on a bit, but Vieira probably of the current day ones. I don't know really currently. I'm a bit nervous about suggesting Walcott or the Ox. They tend to flit in and out games. I know they're match winners. I tend to. My sort of heroes are the guys that are there week in, week out. The Warriors that always putting their foot in, always in the play. Arteta impresses me because he's constantly in the game. It's really hard to pin down one for this year. Who would you have suggested yourself?
I don't know. That's it's a very, very good question.
It's got to be someone who can take the rough and tumble of League One.
I think what we have to do is we have to get some VIP tickets for Crawley, and then we'll come down, assess the team, and then give you an answer after the game.
I think that can certainly be arranged, and if you like to bring your boots with you as well,
You might get a game.
yeah, you certainly might. But,
John, just on the Arsenal bit, you mentioned earlier on about the oil money and stuff, and you know that Arsenal haven't got the oil money. We try and balance our books as much as we can every year, which I think is a great thing. How do you see Arsenal at the moment? I mean,
well, listen, if I could just say first and foremost, Arsenal to me have always been Eton school. You've always, I've been a Spurs fan since I was 5 years old, and I always look at us as being like we're the comprehensive school, and you are Eton. Everything that Arsenal do is done with class. You put some thought into it. You don't just decide to do something and crash bang wallop. There's a lot of thought and a lot of planning that goes into Arsenal, and I think you always think. I mean, I know your manager's been criticised over the years, but he doesn't go out and gamble on his transfer dealings. He's very cautious, and I think it's sometimes better to have someone with a bit of caution that looks after the money. He treats the money as his own. And I must tell you a quick story. I did the marathon in 2000 when I was manager of Villa, and I wrote to every manager in the Premier League looking for a donation. And I got cheques coming back from the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson, from other very well-established Premier League managers, who sent me Sam Allardyce, people like that, sent me £500, £250. And then I got a cheque one day from Arsene Wenger for 25 quid.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's nice to see nothing
Did it bounce?
No, it didn't bounce. I thought, well, that just epitomises him. He's very careful with his money. But no, I just think Arsenal is an amazing club, and I think sometimes you should be careful what you wish for, because he's certainly been under pressure. Not obviously after winning a trophy last season. In the previous years, he's been under a lot of pressure to come up with the goods and to win something. Go and win the Premier League or the Champions League. And I personally think sometimes the fans were calling for his head, and you see what suddenly happened at Manchester United. Manchester United have lost Sir Alex. They made an appointment in David Moyes, which didn't work, and now they've got another one that's at the moment that's not working either. They suddenly spent £60 million on a player that's probably worth about £25 million, and the whole Manchester United club is in turmoil at the moment, without any question. And so are their fans, and that's not the case at Arsenal. And I think the board at Arsenal have been very wise to stay with the person. You know, Doug Ellis always used to say sometimes it's better the devil you know, and certainly in Wenger, I think that you will get continued success over the next few years, and they just stand up for everything that's right, in my opinion, about English football. Arsenal, the way that they left Highbury and went to the Emirates, everything was done immaculate. David Rocastle was an old friend of mine, and you know they've done the David Rocastle Day, and they just do it so well, Arsenal. And I have to say, from the Seven Sisters Road, sometimes I do look down on Arsenal with a little bit of envy, and just wish that Tottenham would run their business along the same lines of Arsenal. So I hope that Arsenal are very successful again this season, and bring a few more trophies back, because I think Arsene Wenger deserves it.
John, as you've been kind enough to give us a half hour of your time, I thought the last question we'd ask would be about your Crawley town. Now, as well as being an Arsenal fan, I support my local team, Peterborough United. Now, at the end of 14-15, I think it's the 24th of April, your penultimate game of the season is against Peterborough United. I might well be there.
It could be for the championship, yeah?
Well, Peterborough are doing well, and you beat Cambridge last night, or the other nights, which I'm really, really happy about. Where do you think you and Crawley Town, or where do you hope you and Crawley Town will be by that time, with 2 games of the season left to go?
Oh, I hope we're threatening the top 6. I've signed Isel McLeod.
Barnet.
Oh, I know him.
Yeah, Isel. Well, I signed Isel. I actually gave him his debut when he was 17 at Derby County back in 2002, and that's really been my only sort of association with him. But I mean, just look at his CV; he's always scored goals, and I know for a fact if I'd have had Isel with me last season, we would have got in the playoffs, because we just couldn't score goals. We went into games, we lost games 1-0. Had 3 or 4 chances, opportunities to have scored, and I didn't have an out-and-out goal scorer in the team. I think if I'd have had Isel last year. So really, I've pinned a lot of hope on him. He scored 3 already for us this season. I think he'll get 20 goals this season, and I think if we look after him, if we manage him properly between matches with recovery and things like that, I think he'll get 20 goals this season, and he could be the one man, I think, that could fire us into a playoff position. And I'd like to think that by the time we go to the Posh at London Road, we'll be looking for maybe a couple of points just to secure a top 6 place.
That's
excellent.
Very good.
And I'll be
and you what?
And I'll be chuffed.
And you'll deserve it.
I'll be well chuffed, yeah.
Well, I think that's about all the questions we have for you, John. Thank you so much for joining us. It's
Cheers,
been an
John.
absolute pleasure.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thanks, guys.
Best for the season, John.
Yeah, all the best for Crawley.
Yes, thank you very much. Keep in touch.
God bless, John.
Cheers,
Cheers.
John. Bye-bye. Next up, we've got a little bit of a Q&A. As you all know, we've got Martin Lipton with us tonight. So, Danny, you have been scouring Facebook and Twitter for questions, so I shall hand it over to you.
Right, these are all questions that, like you say, have come from Facebook, and they're all ones that have been emailed to me by our very own Welsh Justice Jason, so I've not read any of them until now. First one from Rob Coward says, Martin, are there any articles that you've written that you regret publishing but was under pressure to write something from the bosses?
There was one years and years ago. It was when United were in... had to go through the qualifying round of the Champions League. And Arsenal had a press conference the day before, and I went along, and we were desperate for a back page lead. We had nothing. It was one of those days. They weren't very happy what we had because the words from United were rubbish. And my back page turned into Arsene Wenger basically suggested that United don't deserve to be in the Champions League if they're not in the top 3, which, to be fair, I have to admit, wasn't entirely what he said. About 8:30 the next morning, the phone rang, and the number came up, and it was Amanda Doherty on the Arsenal press office. And before she could even say anything, I said, "No, you're right. I apologise." Because sometimes you have to hold your hand up. And on that occasion, it wasn't very clever. That was, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. We all have moments of weakness, I'm sure. But It's more when the paper's desperate for a story. The frustration more often than not is that the headline is too far from what you write, because obviously you take it as far as you can with what someone says, but sub editors always want to take it a little bit further, and you get in more often than not. The biggest problems I've had with clubs has been headlines, and and when Henri was at Arsenal, you used to get him on the phone moaning, and the conversation was always the same. No, that's right, Thierry, I understand. But you do realise I don't like the headlines, don't you? Okay. So was there anything that I wrote that you didn't say? No. So you're happy with what I wrote. You're just not happy with the headline. Okay. But you accept that I don't like the headline. Yeah. So what else is there to say? and that was on a loop quite a bit for a while. But most of the time, there have been others in the past. There was one when I was at the Mail, which was a long time ago, and covering England in Euro 2000, and I was having to hold back the Wolves within the office, and that was quite difficult. And I'm a critical writer. I can't pretend otherwise. I always have been. I find it's part of me that I look to be damning if I feel it needs to be done, and I do so. But some of the stuff that I was having to try and juggle between legitimate criticism of an England team that had gone out in the group phase and had been rubbish and couldn't hold a lead in 2 games, including being 2-0 up, and sheer vituperative abuse, which is what my sports editor wanted to launch on Keegan, was quite a difficult balance to pull off, to be honest. And I did the best I could, and at times it was quite difficult.
And that's not too bad. If that's only 2 things in your entire media career, you're not doing too bad. I suppose you know that.
Well, I think I'm all right. I've not been sued to it too many times. It's normally a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose it's harder in these days of the internet with constant stories all day long. Whereas before the internet, you would just have a deadline and that'd be it. You could carry on.
It's a different beast now from when I started. I've been doing football full time for over 20 years now.
Yeah.
And it's I was working initially at an agency for the Press Association, the National News Agency, which is when I was working when I first met Raj all those years ago. And it was a very, very different age to now. The immediacy of the current media machine is a remarkable beast, to be honest, and it's quite hard to get your head around it at times.
It was a lot more old school than like 20 years ago when we first met. It was David Lacey and even the old Eric Browns from the local districts. I mean, it was a lot more old school, wasn't it? I mean,
it was very different. I mean, to be said, it is interesting that the profile of journalists has changed. People of my age, the 40-something journalists of 20 years ago, would have all drunk like fish, smoked like chimneys, and 1 or 2 of them may have frequented houses of ill repute on a not irregular basis, I'm told. No one drinks anymore. Very few journalists smoke. And we haven't got time for any of the other. So, I mean, the whole industry has been completely transformed over the last 2 decades.
Well, I suppose we should ask you a question about Danny Welbeck. So Jez Fulbrook says, I'm not sure if I've got this back to front or not. He says, do you think Danny Welbeck has been brought in to play as a central striker, or can you see him being used out on the left like he is for England? But I thought it was the other way around. He plays up front for England and out wide on the left for Man United.
He plays more left at the moment for England, to be honest.
I don't watch England, so...
Yeah, well,
okay.
Unfortunately I do. And
yeah.
It's pretty defensive. Well, he can do both. What I would say about Welbeck is... he doesn't score enough goals. Of that, there is no question. But then again, Juventus fans were saying the same as a certain French winger they had in, a few years ago. And you can learn to score goals if you've got the talent. There's no doubt. I'm not saying that there's a comparison between the two, but people have found a change of environment suddenly frees them and they become a different player and confidence filters through. I would say that 2 seasons ago, the best performance by an English player in the Champions League was Welbeck against Real Madrid in both legs for United, when he scored the goal in the first leg and played really, really well. And in the second leg, he sat on Xabi Alonso, and then sprang off him when United got the ball, stopped Real Madrid playing because everything went through Alonso, and his mobility and athleticism allowed him to do that, and his pace then got beyond. And if it hadn't been for Nani's red card, United would have knocked Madrid out of the tournament. And that was down to nobody more than it was to Welbeck and his display. And he is a talented football player. There is of no doubt in my mind that. But going to Arsenal, there's an expectation that he will score lots and lots and lots of goals. And I'm not sure that he's ever going to score lots and lots and lots of goals. I don't really think that's the player he is. My view was that he was good enough for England comfortably. I wasn't entirely convinced that he was good enough for Manchester United in the Champions League and the expectations of Manchester United. I would have to say, and it will pain Arsenal fans, that the expectations of Arsenal are not, even now, anymore those of Manchester United. They were 10 years ago. They're not now. The reality is, while Arsenal fans would like to win the title, very few actually think it's going to happen. 10 years ago, there was an expectation that Arsenal would be first or second, that they would do better in the Champions League. I mean, I don't think that's the case anymore. It should be, perhaps, but it isn't. And therefore, whilst there'll be pressure on Welbeck to perform, and he'll have to do that, he hasn't got quite the demands he was encumbered by, I don't think, at Old Trafford.
Another one about, this is a two-part one from Gaz Huz. His first part, it says, do you think that Welbeck can pull a Sturridge and become a real talent at Arsenal?
Well, he can, unquestionably. You would never have seen Sturridge develop as he has. And there's another proof example. He was playing wide right for Chelsea, wanted to play centre forward, but nobody really had any faith in him because obviously they had to try and displace Drogba, and then they were looking to bring in Torres, and he went further and further down the pecking order and wasn't terribly popular amongst people at Chelsea because of his attitude. He goes to Liverpool and he's undergone a complete transformation, both as a footballer and as a human being. I have to say that the somewhat arrogant, dismissive Danny Welbeck is not the one I see now. He's actually a real revelation and a breath of fresh air to speak to. Sorry, Daniel Sturridge, rather. And so there's no reason why Welbeck, who's not as ebullient as Sturridge by any stretch of the imagination, he's a bit quieter. But there's no reason why he couldn't flourish as well. And I hope he does, because there aren't that many good English players, and you want the ones that are quite decent to play well, because having been at Wembley on Wednesday night, there's no fun watching England at the moment. And one of the few bright spots in that game was Welbeck when he came on actually playing up front alongside Sturridge, being fed by Sterling and creating things which nobody else had done in the entire game.
Yeah, I watched bits of that game and I wasn't overly impressed, but I think that's another topic. The other part of Gaz's question is, why do you think Wenger didn't sign a defensive midfielder or a centre-back when he explicitly said that he would?
I have absolutely no idea.
Does anybody on the planet know?
It defies all concepts of sense. And as we said earlier, the one thing they desperately need is a proper number 4. A holding midfielder, someone can nick the team together, become a fulcrum of the side, to give it balance, to allow the forward players to go without being worried about coming back so often, to give an outlet valve for the defenders to drop in when the fullbacks push on, all of that. And you're left with Arteta, who, decent as he is, isn't quite that player. And Flamini is not the player he was when he left, and he wasn't that great when he left first time. And I think it's a clear flaw in the setup of the squad. For that, the manager must be responsible. And he will tell you otherwise, I'm sure. And but if anyone tries to tell me that Abu Diaby is ever going to be fit, I'm not having that, because clearly he'll play 2 games and then get injured for 5 months. That's what happens, sadly, with him. And unless he's got something up his sleeve, which no one's aware of in the youth team, I just don't get it. I really, really don't. And sometimes you feel with Arsene, it's that he just won't be told. It has to be what he wants to do. And he will not have anyone trying to second guess him or suggest to him that he might be wrong. He just digs in his heels and sticks with what he has.
Another one here, which is I'm not sure who this was aimed at, but this is from at Taffy Maz, says, should Arsenal start building good relationships with super agents like George Mendes, like Chelsea and Man United have? We seem to never get linked with any player he manages, and he does manage the world's best talent at the moment.
Well, that's because of the money.
Yeah.
Arsenal aren't going to play the dough. Arsenal aren't going to pay that sort of dough on a regular basis.
Is it Arsenal or Wenger won't pay it?
Well, whoever, someone, the club, if it's Gazidis, if it's Wenger, if it's Dick Law, if it's whoever it might be, if it's Stan Kroenke, they're not willing to pay that money to buy Mendes players. Mendes doesn't get rubbish. He's got good. Most of his players are pretty good players on his books, apart from the odd centre forward who ends up at Manchester United for large sums of cash. But we can go into that another day. In the main, it's top drawer players, and they want top drawer money. You know, the reason that Arsenal didn't get Falcao is because they simply couldn't afford him. Even if they wanted him, they could not pay 350 grand a week. It's just not going to happen.
Do you think this? I mean, they're talking about Falcao, Martin. Do you think that's value? I mean, it seems a bit strange to me. Does it not smack not desperation? I mean, they've got forwards already, but they really are having a go to try and get back into the top four again. Obviously,
about being top four. It's not about winning the league, because that team is too unbalanced to win the league.
Yeah,
proper teams will take them to pieces tactically. Proper teams with proper managers will kill Manchester United this season, just because they haven't got a midfield. The defence is
all over the place,
seriously lacking. But they've got so much attacking ability in that team that against the poorer teams in the bottom 15 teams in the Premier League, they're probably going to win the vast majority of those games. They'll probably win 25 games, which is enough to get them top four, which allows them next year to get in players, because they're in the Champions League, to give the balance they're going to lack this season. So it does look to me that it's Arsenal versus United for fourth.
Yeah,
that's the battle this season. There's two teams who can win the league. Liverpool are the next best by quite a margin, I think. And then you get Arsenal v United for fourth, and then my lot and Everton for sixth and seventh.
It's interesting that every team he seems to join, they are not in the Champions League. That's it's very strange for me, because you would have thought it would have been the other way around. I mean, there's obviously clubs that were in for him that are in the Champions League. Why do you keep on moving to clubs that are not in the Champions League? It's very strange, isn't it? Is it just the money?
Well, it is money, because obviously he went to Atletico and then went on to. I mean, the view was at the time when he went to Monaco that it was basically a holding pattern for 1 year before he went to Real Madrid, and that Atletico couldn't sell to Real, and therefore Monaco worked as a holding station for a year. But it looks like Real changed their mind about fancying him in the at the end of the window. For some reason, they think that Hernandez is the answer. I'm not entirely sure about that. But when you've got so many big beasts in Ronaldo and Bale and James Rodriguez, and now Kroos and Modric and Uncle Tom Cobley and all, and Benzema, you feel as if you don't need another one. And they did win the Champions League last year, so maybe Ancelotti's right. But it is interesting that desperate clubs do spend desperate money. Monaco wanted to get into the Champions League under the Russian owner, therefore they overpaid. Also, of course, in Monaco, in a country with 75% tax, they don't pay tax at all, or very little. So it was an easy sell for them, possibly, to get him. But he's got bored with playing on top of a car park in front of 3,000 people. So where's he go next? He fancies a big club. United are desperate. They'll pay ridiculous money for him. They'll meet his remarkable salary demands. It's not his fault if they're willing to pay it. And also he gets to play in front of 75, 80,000 people every other week, which is not a bad thing either for his ego. So you can understand why he'd go there.
As time's pushing on, we've got one last question, which is a joint. Two people have asked roughly the same kind of question. At Soul Rebel 10 and at Gas Mutai both say, why is he playing Ozil out wide? It's not really doing him any favours, or the team, or the player, or the club, or anything, which is something I'd like to know as well. Do you have any insight into that?
Well, he often played right coming in, didn't he? In Germany, for Germany, and for Madrid. But the assumption was he was bought as a 10. That makes sense. Maybe it's that he feels he hasn't done enough there. Against Besiktas last week, the best Arsenal player for me was Cazorla by a considerable margin. And it may be that he feels that others are inhibited, that they don't make the runs that they could do, that maybe he feels the space that you'd like Ramsey to run into, and he gets in his way a little bit. If he plays wider, because he has such pace, therefore it means that the opponents will also be aware of that pace and go to cover, which leaves a bit more space inside for that run from Ramsey. And given that Ramsey at the moment is the most likely source of goals for Arsenal, you can understand that. Anything that gets your best midfield goal scorer into positions where he's going to score works for the team. I still think that if you buy Özil and pay £40 million for him, you probably want to build a team around him. I would do. I thought it was a sensational signing when Arsenal bought him last year. I thought he would do far, far better than he did because the quality is unquestioned. He doesn't seem to have fallen in love with English football in quite the way that someone like Schürrle, who's not as good a player, has done, for example. And the same background, you would have thought that they would have, that if any of them was going to thrive, it would be Özil because he's a better player. But he doesn't seem at this juncture to have the same work ethic that someone like Schürrle has, which is a surprise because he comes from that background where you'd have thought the work was just part of what he is. The Turkish background, proving himself anew in a country he's grown up but as an expat community and all of that, you would have expected that he would have that ethos, and he doesn't appear at this juncture to show it on the pitch. I just don't understand. I'm trying to work out why Özil hasn't been Özil, because he's better than he's shown throughout his time at Arsenal. Of that, I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever. And maybe it's a question of us then trying to sort of shock him into performing, trying to try anything that makes it work. In that once he starts playing better, if you have to start wide and find some confidence, then you can go moving back to 10, and he's got that bubble of belief and take that into the games, because there's no question that when he's right, he should be running games in the Premier League, absolutely bossing them. And there's been scant evidence of him really doing that thus far.
No, that's very true. I think, again, Martin, that's our questions run dry. So I understand you want to shoot off, so I'd like to thank you for giving us your time. It's been an absolute pleasure again. I hope you come back at some point in the season.
No, that'd be grand.
Cheers, Martin.
Well
Okay.
done, Martin. Fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers, Martin. Thank you.
Bye.
We'll end this podcast as we always do with shout-outs and predictions. Danny, Man City next, and I'd love a prediction from you, please.
Are we at home or away? I can't remember.
Home.
Home.
Dear. I think if we get a draw, I'll be over the moon. I know Man City lost their last game. They've not been playing on full form. Their players a lot of them have been away for international duty. But I can't see us winning this because our team are in tatters with the way they've played this season. 5 games, I've not seen us play well at all for any of those 5 games. So I'm going to go and say that we're definitely going to score a goal or two. I'm going to go something crazy like 4-2. 4-2 to Man City in the first goal score. Maybe Yaya.
Okay.
I'm depressed already.
Okay, I'm going to do mine next, so I can't accuse anyone of cheating. I'm going to get absolutely ripped apart of this, but I think we will lose 3-1, and I think Aguero will be the first scorer. I just don't think we're quite there yet. Raj, you next?
I'm going to I actually think we'll squeeze a 1-0 win. And I think Welbeck will score, and I think I'll be eating humble pie for many months in the future. And I hope he does score and proves me wrong. I've kind of changed my mind over him over the last couple of days anyway, so I think a 1-0 win. It sounds outlandish, but I've got a feeling about that.
Yeah, there was going to be a Danny Welbeck part segment in this podcast, but unfortunately we've run out of time, so I will save it for next week. Geoff, your final prediction, please.
I'm going to go, surprisingly, 2-1 Danny Welbeck.
Ooh, balls out
Fancy
the
he's gonna,
bath on that one and all.
yeah, I fancy he's definitely going to score this week.
I think he'll score. I honestly think he'll score. As if he's played down the middle.
Yes. Right then, some shout outs. I'm going to go first. God, I'm being greedy this week. And I'm going to go for Matt Spicer 66, and that's MATTSPICER 66. And he was the one that actually asked the Danny Welbeck question, which kind of gave birth to the whole segment on it. So I'd just like to thank him for getting involved, and he's a fantastic Gooner to go and follow. So go and show him some love. Geoff?
Yeah, I'm going to go for a lovely chap on Twitter. You must probably all follow him anyway. He's so funny, very witty. He's a writer, and incidentally, he's got a play on in the East End. I think sometime next week. I think it runs for a week or so. So maybe you've got to check that out. But his name is Johnny O'Neill, so it's at Johnny O'Neill.
Okay, fantastic. Danny?
I'm just going to go and have a look at someone at random who's been interacting with the podcast, and the first person I see is Dan Thomas, who is at Daniel T92 Wales, which happens to be someone that I think we've all been speaking to.
Oh, not another Welsh person. I've been inundated with him. I've had enough of that idiot Jason for the lot of I've had a gutful of him.
Oh, so you couldn't get away with a little bit of Welsh justice from Daniel there. So there you go. Hello, Dan, or Daniel, whichever one you'd like to be called.
And finally, Raj.
I'm going to shout out Kieran. I'm not going to at him because he doesn't at me.
I think he's been a little bit misunderstood there. I've been friends with him for quite a while on there, but don't be too harsh on the boy.
I'm not going to be too harsh.
He's off to university soon, so good luck, mate.
I will actually at MZK90, by the way. Then Mark King. He kind of does make me laugh. That man. So
he's been annoying my sprog all afternoon.
He's funny. He's a funny guy. Follow him. He's good.
He did ask a question for us earlier when we asked for the questions for the show, and he wanted to know which one of us spent the longest in the shower. But probably Danny.
Not spent the longest. Was the longest.
Was the longest in the shower? I don't know. I've not seen your winky.
The last I saw, he was talking to Big Ted official, so we'll probably never see him again.
Oh, he's gone then.
Yeah.
We should end this then, and I will do by saying that. Just a little idea that we've had for the podcast. I don't know how many people listen to this and think, God, you know what, I'd like to listen to that live. We get maybe 15, 20 suggestions a week of people that say that they'd like to do it. So we've thought that maybe if we run a series of competitions and people get involved and interact and enter with them, that we might give away the chance to listen in on a podcast as we're recording it, because there are things that don't actually make the final cut of this.
Well, this has been just over 2 hours long.
Yes.
All uncut. It's all uncut. It's very good.
It's good stuff. So let us know what you think on that. If you like the idea, if you'd want to listen in while we do it live. So yeah, just drop us a tweet on at the AFC podcast.
Because we noticed this the other day when we were doing the 500-hour transfer deadline one. We had Chris was listening in for most of those, but he wasn't talking, so he just had himself on mute. And then Thomas Munt was there for about 6 hours of the whole day with us on mute, and then off mute when he was talking. So then, Rachel, might be a good idea to see if someone wants to get on mute and just listen to right from the beginning all the way through to the end.
Yeah, and they can come up at the end and ask a question as well.
And see if you can manage to not lose the will to live like I currently have.
Fantastic. So we'll end it on that then. So that was a Bergkamp Wonderland podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and keep it Arsenal. Good night.
Oh, 8 hours of bloody podcasting in a week. I've had enough.
I totally fucked off with it by now.
20,000 listeners though. Hello.
Language. I told you not to swear.
No swearing.
Sorry. Jesus.
You're a pedantic pair of fuckers.
Let's just hope they've turned off before the end. There you go.
do you go? What do you want to say?